The first nail went through the cedar cross just after sunrise. Clara Thorne heard it from the room where her son lay burning with fever. The sound was small compared with the things that had happened in her life. Smaller than a mine collapse. Smaller than the winter storm that had taken half the cattle in Oakhaven. Smaller than the church bell that had rung when her husband Owen was carried home under a canvas sheet 2 years earlier. But that single blow of iron against wood changed the shape of the morning more completely than any of them. Leo stirred on the narrow bed. Clara put one hand against his chest. His heart fluttered beneath her palm, too fast, like a sparrow trapped behind a shutter. His nightshirt clung to him. She had changed it twice since midnight, and washed his face so often that the basin water had gone cloudy with soap, sweat, and the reddish dust that came through every crack in an Arizona summer. Outside, the hammer struck again. Clara stood. The house smelled of boiled willow bark, damp linen, lamp oil, and the sour heat of sickness. A pot on the stove had cooked dry sometime before dawn. The bottom had blackened. She could smell that too, a bitter char under everything else. She crossed the plank floor without putting on her shoes. At the door, she rested her fingers against the wood. Another strike came through her palm. "Silas," she said. The hammer stopped. For a moment, she heard only the buzzing of flies against the kitchen window. Dr. Silas Miller answered from the porch. "Clara, don't open the door." She almost laughed. There was no humor in her, but the words were so absurd they scraped against something raw. "You've been inside this house every day this week." That was before the board met. The board, yes. She pictured the men who sat on that board. Storekeeper Amos Bell, whose wife Clara had nursed through a winter cough. Reverend Pike, who had eaten at her table after Owen's funeral. Silas himself, 2 ranchers. And Harlan Moss, who owned the quarantine shed by the creek and had once told Clara it was too rotten to store harness in. "What did they decide?" she asked, though she already understood the meaning of the cedar cross being nailed to her door. Silas cleared his throat. "The boy has to be moved before sundown." "To where?" No answer came quickly enough. "To where?" "Silas?" "The isolation shed." Clara closed her eyes. The shed stood beyond the last cottonwoods where the creek thinned to mud. 3 miners had spent their last nights there the previous winter after lung fever swept through the north camp. Clara had taken them soup. She remembered how the wind slipped through gaps in the siding and made the lantern flame bend sideways. She remembered one man asking her to stuff his coat under the door because he could not stop shivering. "You know what that place is," she said. "It keeps illness away from the town. It keeps dying people out of sight. Clara, tell me I'm wrong." Silas said nothing. Behind her, Leo coughed. It was not a child's ordinary cough. It came low and wet, then ended in a weak whimper. Clara turned her head toward the bedroom. Silas spoke more quietly. "I've done what I can." "No, you've done what you know." A long pause. "There may not be a difference. There is to me. Scarlet fever has already taken 2 children east of here. People are frightened. So you nailed their fear to my door. The cross is a warning. It's a grave marker. Clara, listen to me. If Leo stays there, folks may take matters into their own hands. I'm trying to prevent something worse." She looked down. A thin line of morning light cut beneath the door and lay across her bare toes. Silas sounded tired now. Not cruel. That made it worse. Cruelty could be hated cleanly. Fear was messier. Fear wore familiar faces and apologized while it shut the gate. "What would you do?" she asked. "If he were yours?" Silas did not answer. Clara waited until she heard his boots move across the porch. The boards creaked. A horse snorted. Leather shifted. Then hoofbeats retreated toward the center of town. She did not open the door. She went back to Leo. He was 4 years old and looked smaller than he had the week before. His hair, usually the color of wheat straw, lay damp and dark against his forehead. The rash along his chest had deepened. His lips were dry enough to crack when he breathed. Clara sat beside him and lifted the cup on the stool. "Try a little." His eyes opened halfway. "Mama? I'm here. Hot. I know." He turned his face away from the cup. "Just one swallow." "No, one for me." His mouth trembled. Clara touched the cup to his lower lip. He took enough water to wet his tongue, then coughed again. She set the cup aside. For 3 days, Silas had given powders, cool compresses, and advice that became less certain each time he visited. On the previous night, after listening to Leo's chest, he had sat at Clara's table and stared at his hands. "There's a man in the White Canyons," Clara had said. Silas had looked up sharply. She had heard about the healer first from an old freight driver named Mercer, who swore the man had saved him after a snake bite. Then from a Mexican shepherd who said the same healer knew how to break a fever when a child could no longer drink. Oakhaven called him breath taker, sometimes as praise, more often as insult. His name, according to those who had met him, was Taza. Silas had told her not to repeat such things. Why, she had asked. Because you're exhausted. That's not an answer. He's Chiricahua. The army has been looking for him for years. I asked whether he can heal. I'm a doctor, and my son is dying. Silas had flinched as if she had struck him. Now Clara rose from the bed. Decision did not come with thunder. There was no grand moment where fear disappeared. Fear stayed exactly where it had been, under her ribs and behind her tongue. The decision simply arrived beside it and proved heavier. She crossed into the kitchen and pulled Owen's old canvas map from the cabinet above the flour bin. The paper still carried a grease stain from his thumb. He had marked freight routes, dry washes, and springs in pencil. 50 miles northwest, beyond a stretch of broken country labeled White Ravenies, someone had drawn a small circle beside a canyon system. Clara had once asked Owen about it. Apache country, he had said. Is it dangerous? Everything's dangerous if you go without knowing why. She remembered the way he had folded the map after saying it. Now she laid it on the table and traced the distance with one finger. 50 miles. She had no horse. Owen's mare had been sold to pay the mining debt after his death. No one in town would lend Clara an animal with a sick child. Even if someone had the courage, the black cross on her door had made the house untouchable. She stared at the map. Then she began to pack. Not clothes, not keepsakes, not the blue china her mother had sent from Missouri. She filled the water skin. She took 2 squares of hard bread, a pinch of salt, a small knife, flint thread, 1 needle, and the wool shawl Owen had bought her during their first winter in Arizona. From the wash line she pulled down a clean sheet and tore it into strips. She soaked several pieces in cool water and wrapped Leo's chest and neck. He whimpered but did not wake fully. Clara changed into her heaviest walking boots and a plain brown dress with a looser waist. She cut the lower stays from her corset with Owen's knife because she knew she would need to breathe. The small act felt scandalous and practical at once. Before lifting Leo, she stopped in the kitchen. The house looked almost insultingly ordinary. A spoon rested beside the stove. A crust of yesterday's bread sat under a cloth. Owen's chair still had the slight inward lean caused by the loose rear leg he had always promised to repair. On the wall hung Leo's wooden horse, one wheel missing because he had dragged it too hard across the porch. Clara took the toy down. She almost put it in her bag. Then she returned it to the nail. Weight mattered now. Leo mattered. Nothing else did. She tied the shawl into a sling, lifted her son against her chest, and stood beneath the strain until her balance settled. At the door, she finally looked at the black cross. The cedar had been charred over a fire until the surface turned dark and oily. 4 fresh nail heads shone in the sun. Clara reached out and touched one. Then she stepped past it. Oakhaven saw her leave. Curtains moved in the windows. The women at the well went silent. A wagon driver stopped loading sacks and stared as though a ghost had walked into the road. Clara carried Leo beneath the shade of the mercantile awning. No one came near. At the blacksmith shop, Ezra Cole stopped hammering. He was a thick-armed man with a scar through one eyebrow. Owen had once worked beside him repairing a collapsed shaft support. Ezra's wife had borrowed Clara's cradle when their daughter was born. Clara met his eyes. For one hopeful second, he stepped away from the forge. Then a woman behind him called his name. Ezra looked toward the sound. When he looked back, shame had already won. He lowered his hammer. Clara continued walking. Near the church steps, Reverend Pike stood with his hat against his chest. "Mrs. Thorne," he said. She did not stop. "Clara," she turned. He looked old in the morning light. "I'll pray for the boy." She glanced at the empty hands holding his hat. "That's light enough to carry," she said. She kept walking before he could answer. The last building in Oakhaven was Harlan Moss's stable. Beyond it, the boardwalk ended and the road narrowed into 2 ruts running through dust. Clara stepped off the boards. The town noise changed immediately. Hooves, voices, saws, and wagon wheels faded behind her. Ahead lay a different silence, open and enormous. Leo breathed against her neck. She adjusted the sling. "You stay with me," she whispered. He did not answer. For the first mile, Clara could still smell smoke from Oakhaven chimneys. By the third, the smell was gone. The trail crossed low scrub where creosote bushes grew far apart, each one holding a private patch of shade. The morning sun climbed quickly. The earth changed from rust-colored dust to hard ground, studded with flint that flashed white when she stepped over it. Clara knew better than to walk fast in the first hours. Owen had taught her that much. Desert kills pride before it kills the body, he had told her once, after helping search for a missing surveyor. People hurry because they're afraid of distance. Then distance lets them know who's stronger. So Clara kept a pace she could repeat. Left foot, right foot, breathe. She used the rhythm of Leo's breathing to keep herself from thinking about Miles. At first he was restless. His fingers twitched at the collar of her dress. Twice he mumbled for water. She stopped only long enough to wet his lips and take one measured swallow herself. The water skin made a full, heavy sound against her hip. She wanted to drink until her stomach hurt. Instead, she tightened the stopper. By late morning, her shoulders had begun to burn, the sling cut beneath one arm. Leo's weight was not great. But weight became something different when carried hour after hour. It stopped being pounds and became pressure. On the spine, the hips, the lungs, the mind. Clara shifted him slightly. He cried out. She froze. Sorry, sweetheart. His eyes opened. Home? He whispered. Clara looked ahead at a valley swimming under heat. No, want bed, I know. Owen horse. For a moment she did not understand. Then she remembered the wooden toy hanging on the wall. Your horse is waiting. Leo's mouth moved into the faintest shape of a smile. When we get back, she said, I'll fix his wheel. He closed his eyes again. The promise frightened her because it required a future. She kept walking. Near midday, the road passed between low ridges and the wind disappeared. Heat settled in the hollow as if poured there. Clara's shadow shrank almost directly beneath her. She could smell her own skin, the leather of her boots, dust, and the medicinal bitterness of creosote. Her mouth dried. She sucked a pebble she had washed before leaving town, rolling it under her tongue to call up saliva. At the 10th mile, she stopped under an overhang no wider than a table. She lowered Leo carefully. His body sagged against the ground blanket. Clara removed the damp cloths. They had warmed to his skin. She rinsed them with a few precious spoonfuls of water and laid them back across his neck, under his arms, and over his chest. His rash looked angrier. Leo, no response. She touched his cheek. His eyelids fluttered. Open your eyes for me. He did. What color is my dress? He stared without understanding. Leo, look, brown. Relief came so strongly she nearly laughed. That's right. He swallowed with difficulty. Water. She gave him 3 small sips. When she lifted the skin to her own lips, she allowed herself only one. The water was already warm. She rested 5 minutes, no more. Rest invited the body to discover how tired it was. When Clara stood again, her knees had stiffened. She stamped one foot, then the other until blood moved. She tied Leo back into the sling. By the 12th mile, the road became less distinct. By the 15th, it was barely a road at all. Owen's map guided her by ridges and dry washes. Clara stopped twice to check the angle of the sun. A mistake of even a few miles could kill them. She began talking to Leo, not because he answered, but because his silence frightened her. She told him about the first rainstorm he had ever seen, when he had crawled naked into the yard before she could catch him. She told him how his father had laughed so hard he dropped a bucket. She told him about the time a hen stole a biscuit from his hand, and he chased it through the kitchen, yelling that thieves should go to jail. His breathing continued. That was enough. Late in the afternoon, her left heel began to burn. At first, she ignored it. Then the burn sharpened into a blade with each step. She knew the blister had opened. Clara continued until the trail crossed a patch of thin shade cast by a limestone shelf. Only then did she lower Leo and remove the boot. Blood had soaked the heel of her stocking. She peeled the wool away and hissed. A patch of skin larger than a coin had torn loose. The sight would have alarmed her on any ordinary day. This was not an ordinary day. She washed the wound with 2 spoonfuls of water, threaded the needle, and reinforced the inside heel of the stocking with a folded scrap from her sheet. Then she wrapped the foot with another strip and forced it back into the boot. She ate half a square of bread. It was so dry she had to hold it in her mouth until saliva softened it. Leo would not eat. He took water, but only when she let drops fall from her fingertips. The sun dropped lower. For the first time since leaving Oakhaven, Clara turned and looked behind her. There was no town, only distance. The absence should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel strangely free. No board could reach her here. No neighbor could close a curtain in her face. No man with a hammer could decide where her son was allowed to die. The desert might kill them, but at least it had not lied about what it was. She stood. A mile later, the heel of her left boot tore away. The leather gave with a dry crack. Her foot twisted sideways and she nearly fell. Clara caught herself against a rock, protecting Leo with both arms. Pain ran up her ankle. She waited until it passed enough to think. Then she sat. The boot was ruined. The sole had separated at the back, and the stitching had pulled through leather baked brittle by heat. Clara removed her apron. It was one of the few pieces of clothing that still belonged to Oakhaven life, a brown cotton apron she had worn while kneading bread that morning before Leo first worsened. She tore it down the middle. The sound was clean and final. She wrapped strips around the boot, binding sole to upper. She made the knots under the arch so they would not rub the wound on her heel. It was ugly work. It held. She looked at Leo. His lips were pale. 20 miles, she whispered. The number felt impossible. Not because it was far, but because it meant 30 remained. So she stopped thinking in miles. She lifted him again. Next bush, she said. She walked to the next bush. Next stone. She walked to the stone. Next shadow. And when the sun finally touched the western ridges, Clara Thorne was still moving. Night did not arrive gently. The desert kept the sun's heat trapped in stone until the last edge of light disappeared. Then the temperature fell as if someone had opened a door onto winter. Clara felt it first on the sweat beneath her dress. Her back, wet from carrying Leo, turned cold. Goose flesh rose along her arms. The boy shivered once against her shoulder. That frightened her more than the fever. She stopped beside a cluster of boulders and took Owen's wool shawl from the sling. It had been carrying most of Leo's weight, so she replaced it with strips from the sheet tied across her shoulders, then wrapped the shawl around the child. Leo made a weak sound. What is it? Cold. I know. She pressed his hand between both of hers. His fingers were hot despite the shiver. Clara sat with her back against a rock and drew him into her lap. For 10 minutes she let his heat sink into her, and her body shelter him from the wind. Above them the first stars appeared. They looked too bright. Owen had loved the night sky. He used to point out the North Star and laugh whenever Clara pretended not to remember it. That one doesn't move much, he would say. If you forget everything else, keep one thing that stays put. Clara found it now. She checked the map by moonlight, more from memory than sight, and fixed her direction again. When she stood, Leo did not wake. The next hours became a series of small negotiations. Walk until her thighs trembled. Stop for 1 minute, wet Leo's lips. Check the map. Walk again. At some point, the remaining hard bread became too difficult to swallow, so she tucked it away. Hunger was easier than thirst. She counted footsteps in groups of 100. At first, she kept track of the hundreds. Then she lost count. She began using Leo's first words instead. Mama, she whispered on one step. Son on the next, bird. Horse. The 4 words made a rhythm. Mama, son, bird, horse. Sometimes Leo stirred when he heard them. Sometimes he did not. Near midnight, the ground dipped into a dry wash lined with cottonwood roots. Clara stopped. The smell had changed. The air held the faint dampness of buried water. She knelt and pressed her palm to the sand. The surface was dry and loose, but beneath it the soil felt cooler. She remembered watching Owen dig in washes during cattle drives. Water hides under bends, he had told her. Look where roots grow that shouldn't. Clara laid Leo in the shelter of the bank. His breath rattled. She began digging. Her hands were already cracked, so she found a flat piece of shale and used it like a scoop. The first 6 inches were powder. Then the soil darkened. She dug deeper. Her shoulders screamed. She kept going. At nearly a foot, the bottom of the hole began to shine. Water seeped upward slowly, carrying mud with it. Clara laughed once. It came out more like a cough. She let the water settle, then laid a clean strip of cloth over the surface and pressed it down. The fabric darkened. She lifted it, smelled it, touched it to her tongue. Bitter, earthy, mineral, but not foul. She wrung a little into the cup and waited. When no strange film formed, she gave Leo a few drops. He swallowed. Clara gave him more. Only after he had taken enough to wet his mouth did she drink herself. The water tasted of clay and iron and old stone. It was the best thing she had ever swallowed. She filled the skin slowly by straining seep water through cloth. It took nearly an hour. During that hour, Clara rested without allowing herself to sleep. She leaned against the bank and watched Leo. His face looked wrong in moonlight. Too still, too thin. She touched his hair. Your father would be angry with me, she said softly. Leo's eyelids moved. For what? The question surprised her so much she almost cried. For leaving your horse behind. The wheel broke. Yes. You fix it when we get home. Home now? No, sweetheart. He frowned. Clara brushed dust from his cheek. We're going somewhere first. Where? To a man who knows how to help you. Doctor? She looked at the dark wash around them. Better listener. Leo closed his eyes. Clara sat there another minute, holding the cup between both hands. Then she stood. The repaired boot had stiffened. When she put weight on it, pain flared through the torn heel. She took one breath. Then another mama, son, bird, horse. She climbed out of the wash. By dawn, she had covered perhaps another 8 miles. The exact distance no longer mattered. The sunrise came behind her in a red line that spread across the eastern sky. Heat returned almost immediately, first pleasant against her cold shoulders, then threatening. Clara found a narrow strip of shade and rested before the sun climbed high. She removed both boots. The right foot was blistered. The left was worse. The apron strips had cut into swollen flesh. Dust had mixed with blood until the heel looked coated in rust. She cleaned both feet as well as she could. The left boot would not survive another day. She looked at it for a long time. Then she cut the leather away from the damaged heel and wrapped her foot with layers of cloth instead. The remaining shoe became half boot, half bandage. Leo watched her through half-open eyes. Mama hurt? A little. He frowned. Clara smiled at him. Not as bad as stepping on your wooden horse. His mouth twitched. It was not quite a laugh, but it was enough to make her chest tighten. She gave him water. He drank more willingly than before. Then he vomited it onto the dirt. Clara froze. The liquid disappeared into the sand almost instantly. Leo began coughing. She rolled him onto his side and held him until the fit passed. His body shook in her arms. No more, he whispered. You need some. No, we'll wait. She knew she had to keep fluid in him, but she also knew forcing too much would bring it back up. She waited 15 minutes, then wet his lips rather than making him swallow. It was not enough, but it was something. When they started again, the sun was already high. The land grew rougher. Low volcanic outcrops broke the valley into narrow channels. Clara chose paths that kept the horizon northwest. Around mid-morning, she heard the rattle. She stopped so fast that Leo's head bumped her shoulder. 10 feet ahead, in the shade of a creosote bush, a diamondback lay coiled. Its tail moved again. The sound was dry and hard, like beans shaken in a tin cup. Clara's body reacted before her thoughts did. Her heart slammed, her hands tightened around Leo. The snake raised its head. She could have backed away quickly. Instead, she remembered Owen's warning. Sudden movement invites a strike. So she stood still. The rattling continued. Clara breathed through her nose. The snake watched her. Its body was thick, beautifully patterned, the colors almost invisible against dust and stone. For the first time since leaving Oakhaven, Clara understood how little hatred the desert contained. The snake was not cruel. The heat was not cruel. The flint was not cruel. They simply existed without promising mercy. People were different. People made promises, the snake uncoiled by degrees. It slid beneath the bush, crossed a patch of open ground, and disappeared into a crack between rocks. Clara waited another 10 breaths. Then she stepped forward. She found herself watching how the snake had moved, low, direct, conserving energy. She adjusted Leo higher against her hips and shortened her stride. The difference was small but immediate. The pressure shifted from her shoulders to stronger muscles in her legs. She stopped lifting her feet as high and began placing them carefully on flatter stones. That became the rule of the next miles. No wasted motion, no unnecessary thought. She no longer fought the desert, she read it. A line of mesquite meant roots and perhaps moisture. A raven circling low might mean carrion, not water. Pale stone reflected more heat. Dark volcanic rock held it long after sunset. Cactus shadows were short but useful. Wind moved differently through gullies. Clara did not become a desert woman in one day. She simply stopped demanding that the land behave like a town road. Around noon, the left boot finally died. The remaining sole tore free and hung from the toe. Clara removed it and threw it aside. She wrapped the foot in all the cloth she could spare. The ground burned through the layers. Within a mile, she felt blood. Within 2, the sensation became too large to separate into pain. It was simply part of walking. She kept Leo talking when she could. What animal will you have when you're grown? She asked. Horse. What color? Black. Why black? Fast. How do you know black horses are fast? He did not answer. Clara smiled weakly. Maybe you're right. Hours later, when the White Canyons first appeared distinctly on the horizon, she thought of that answer. Black horse. Fast. The mountains were still far away, but they had shape now. Pale walls rose beyond reddish ridges, reflecting sunlight with an almost white glare. Clara stared until the sight became real. She had not imagined them. They existed. so Taza might exist too. Hope returned, and with it came danger. Hope encouraged the body to spend what it had been saving. Clara forced herself to keep the same pace. By afternoon, Leo stopped answering questions. She touched his cheek every few minutes. His fever remained fierce. His breathing had changed again, becoming shallower, with a pause after every few breaths that made Clara's stomach turn cold. She began telling him stories. Not memories this time. Stories about the healer. She did not know enough about Taza to tell the truth, so she invented what Leo needed. He lives where the white rocks keep cold water, she said. He knows which roots hide medicine. He has a horse so black the night mistakes it for a shadow. Leo stirred slightly. Clara continued. The horse runs faster than dust. Black? He whispered. Yes, fast, the fastest. What man name? Taza. Leo tried the word and failed halfway through. Clara kissed his hair. That's all right. You can tell him later. The day stretched. At some point she lost the second boot. She could not remember exactly when. One moment it was on her right foot. Later she realized she was walking on wrapped cloth alone. She did not go back for it. The flint tore through the bandages. She added strips from the hem of her dress. Her skirt shortened unevenly around her calves. Toward evening, every step left a small dark mark. Clara saw the first one and looked away. Blood was evidence. Nothing more. Her body could spend it if it had to. The wind changed at sunset. It came down from higher ground, carrying the scent of pine and something else, smoke. Clara stopped. She lifted her face. Wood smoke, not wildfire. Not the dry, dirty smoke of Oakhaven chimneys. Cedar or juniper, faint but definite. She turned toward the nearest rise. The climb nearly ended her. Her thighs shook. She leaned forward until Leo's weight pressed between her shoulder blades. Her bare, wrapped feet slipped on gravel. Once she fell to one knee. The impact sent pain through her hip. She stood again. At the top she saw a thread of blue smoke in the distance. It rose from the base of the pale ravines. Clara laughed. This time the sound became a sob. She covered her mouth because she did not want to waste breath. Leo, no answer. Leo, look. His head did not move. She reached back and touched his neck. Pulse. Fast, but there. We're close. The distance from the ridge to the smoke looked short. It was not. 2 miles in daylight on rested legs would have been little. For Clara, it became the longest part of the journey. Her feet had swollen so badly that the cloth wraps pulled tight. The muscles in her lower back spasmed. Her vision darkened at the edges whenever she stood too straight. She stopped counting steps because numbers had begun to lose meaning. Instead, she chose objects. That boulder, that cactus, that patch of pale grass. Each object became the entire world until she reached it. Then she chose another. The smoke thickened. She heard a horse. The sound was low and distant, a single whinny. Black horse, Leo had said. Fast. Clara tried to smile. Your horse is here, she whispered. At the base of the final slope, her knees stopped working. There was no warning. One moment she was walking. The next she hit the ground. Dust filled her mouth. Leo's weight drove the air from her lungs. Clara lay still. The sky above her had turned violet. A black shape stood 30 yards away beside a scrub oak. A stallion. For several seconds, Clara thought she had created it with exhaustion. Then it moved its head. Real. She tried to stand. Nothing happened. Her legs trembled but did not lift her. Clara dug her fingers into the ground. She pulled herself forward. The first yard tore skin from her knees. The second broke 2 fingernails. She did not care. Leo was still tied against her back. She could feel the rise and fall of him. The camp stood just beyond a line of brush. Several low shelters, smoke from a cooking fire, hides stretched on frames the shape of saddles and baskets. No one moved. Perhaps they had seen her. Perhaps they were waiting to learn what she was. Clara dragged herself another yard, then another. Her throat could not form a proper shout. Help, she tried. It came out as breath. The black horse lifted its head. Footsteps sounded from the camp. Clara stopped crawling. A man emerged from the shade of a cedar. He was taller than she had imagined, though perhaps everyone looked tall from the ground. His hair was tied back. He wore a faded buckskin shirt darkened at the shoulders from work and dust. A knife hung at his belt. No rifle was visible. He did not hurry. That angered Clara for one irrational second. Then she saw where he was looking, not at her face, at the ground behind her. His gaze followed the broken line of blood from her feet, the drag marks from her knees, the places where she had fallen and risen. He looked toward the horizon, then back at the trail. Something in his expression changed. Not pity, recognition. Clara had seen pity all over Oakhaven. Pity was soft, it stood far away. This was different. The man crouched beside her. Taza, she asked. His eyes moved to Leo. Clara tried to turn so he could see the boy. Fever, she said. 4 days. He can't keep water. Breathing, Taza placed 2 fingers against Leo's neck. His face became focused. He began to untie the sling. Clara grabbed his wrist. No. The word came out stronger than anything else she had said. Taza looked at her hand around him. Clara's fingers were stiff, black with dirt, blood dried under the nails. No, she repeated. He did not pull away. He stays with me. Taza spoke for the first time. If he stays on you, I cannot help him. His English was measured, each word placed carefully. Clara's grip tightened. Taza waited. Behind him, another figure moved near a fire, but did not approach. The black stallion shifted and stamped once. Taza looked at Clara's face. You carried him here. Yes. Now let me carry him 10 steps. Clara's fingers opened, not because she wanted to release Leo, because she had no strength left to close them again. Taza slid one arm beneath the boy's knees and one behind his back. When he lifted Leo away, Clara's body reacted violently to the missing weight. Her shoulders jerked upward. Her arms remained bent as if still holding him. Her spine, curved forward for miles, refused to straighten. The emptiness against her chest felt wrong. She reached toward Taza. Don't, I have him. She tried to stand. Her ankles folded. Taza caught her with his free arm. For the first time in 2 days, Clara's feet no longer carried her. Pain arrived all at once. It rose from the soles of her feet, through her calves and knees, bright enough to erase the camp. She made a sound she did not recognize. Taza turned his head and called something in Chiricahua. A woman came from one of the shelters, older than Clara, silver threaded through her dark hair. She took Clara beneath one arm. Together they brought her inside. The wickiup smelled of cedar smoke, leather, damp earth, and crushed plants. The difference from Oakhaven struck Clara before anything else. There was sickness here, but no smell of surrender. Taza laid Leo on a deerskin pallet near the low fire. He placed his ear against the boy's chest, then took a narrow hollow reed from a pouch and used it to listen more carefully. Clara watched every movement. Taza checked Leo's throat, his eyes, his fingernails. He pressed gently below the ribs. He turned the boy onto his side and listened again. The older woman began cutting Clara's foot wraps. Clara pulled away. Leave them. The woman ignored her. Taza. He did not look up. Tell her to leave my feet. They are full of dirt, he said. I don't care. You will when you need them again. My boy. I am looking at him. Can you help him? Taza finally raised his eyes. Clara hated the pause before his answer. Yes, he said. Maybe. Maybe? That is the honest word. It hurt more than certainty would have. Clara swallowed. What do you need? Taza looked back at Leo. Time. We don't have much. No, what else? His gaze shifted toward the entrance, where the black stallion stood beyond the firelight. Water, he said. Clara almost laughed from exhaustion. There's water in my skin, not that water. He touched Leo's neck again, measuring the pulse. Cold mineral spring in the North Canyon. How far? 20 miles. The words entered Clara slowly. She looked at her ruined feet, then at the horse. Taza saw the movement of her eyes. He said nothing. Outside, somewhere far across the darkening desert, a bugle sounded. The note carried faintly through the canyon. Taza's face changed. The older woman paused over Clara's feet. The black stallion raised its head. A second note followed. Clara looked toward the entrance. What is that? Taza kept one hand on Leo's chest. Men coming for me. How far? He listened. Not far enough. The older woman finished cutting away the cloth around Clara's left foot. Clara looked down once and wished she had not. The sole was swollen and split in several places. Small shards of stone and black grit had worked into the skin. Blood had dried in thin brown lines around the arch. The woman clicked her tongue softly. What is her name? Clara asked. Taza was heating water in a clay pot. Naiche. Naiche glanced up at the sound of her name, then returned to Clara's foot. Does she speak English? Enough to know when someone tells her to stop. Naiche's mouth pulled into a brief smile. Clara understood the joke a second late. It was the first ordinary human moment she had experienced since the Black Cross went up. Then Leo coughed. The room changed again. Taza moved immediately. He lifted the boy higher on the pallet and rolled a folded hide beneath his shoulders. He poured hot water over crushed leaves in a shallow bowl and set heated stones around it. Steam rose. The scent was sharp and green. What is that? Clara asked. Mullein, sage, some mint? Will it cure him? No. The directness of the answer stopped her. It may make breathing easier. Taza waved steam toward Leo's face with a flat piece of woven grass. Clara watched his hands. They were large and scarred, but they moved gently around the child. What about the spring? The water carries salts, cold from stone. He needs fluid. He needs cooling. He needs his throat to stay open. You said it was 20 miles. Yes, I can go. Naichi laughed once without humor. Clara looked at her. The older woman lifted Clara's left foot slightly and let it drop back onto the hide. Pain shot to Clara's hip. She gripped the edge of the pallet. Nachi pointed at her, then at the ground, and said something in Chiricahua that sounded final. Taza translated only part of it. She says you cannot cross the room. She said more than that. She did. Clara might have smiled if Leo had not made another rasping sound. Taza removed the wet cloth from the boy's neck and replaced it. The steam loosened something. Leo coughed hard, then brought up a thread of mucus. Taza turned his head and cleared it with a cloth before the child could choke. Clara forced herself not to interfere. It was harder than walking. Outside, the bugle sounded again, closer. Taza listened without turning his head. Naishi did not react visibly, but her hands moved faster as she washed Clara's wounds. Who are they? Clara asked. 6th Cavalry. Why are they after you? Taza looked at her. The question landed badly. Clara understood too late how it sounded. The settler woman asking the hunted man to justify why soldiers wanted him. I'm not asking because I think they should be, she said. Taza returned to the bowl. Captain Vance has reasons written on paper. What reasons? Leaving the reservation, helping others leave. Taking horses they say belong to them, refusing to go east. Florida? His eyes flicked toward her. Clara had heard the stories. Apache prisoners sent across the country to a humid land of swamps and forts, far from the mountains that made sense of their lives. My brother died before he reached there, Taza said. He said it the way he had said 20 miles. A fact, heavy but not displayed. Clara lowered her gaze. I'm sorry. Taza shrugged once. Sorry does not bring a man home. No. He looked at Leo. Work sometimes brings a child home. That was the end of it. For the next hour, the wickiup settled into labor. Naichi cleaned Clara's feet with warm water that stung worse than the stones had. She picked grit from the cuts with a bone needle. Clara clenched her jaw and stared at Leo so she would not pull away. Taza rotated heated stones into the steam basin. He wiped Leo's arms, neck, and chest with cool cloths. He coaxed tiny amounts of liquid between the boy's lips. When Leo's throat seized and he coughed, Taza waited. When he could swallow, Taza gave another drop. No one prayed aloud, no one promised anything. The quiet itself felt respectful. Eventually, Naichi covered Clara's feet with a paste that smelled of pine resin and crushed juniper, then wrapped them in soft buckskin. Clara could no longer feel individual cuts. She could only feel heat and throbbing. You need sleep, Taza said. No, that was not a question. I didn't walk 50 miles to sleep while he dies. Taza looked at her for a long moment. Then sleep while he lives. The words caught her off guard. He is still breathing, Taza continued. If that changes, I wake you. I won't sleep. Naichi pressed 2 fingers to Clara's forehead, then pushed her gently but firmly backward onto a pallet. Clara tried to resist. Her body refused. The ceiling swayed above her. She turned her head toward Leo. Taza was still there. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was the soft hiss of water on hot stone. When Clara woke, the fire had burned lower. She did not know whether minutes or hours had passed. Panic brought her upright too fast. Pain exploded through her feet. Leo, he is here. Taza sat beside the boy. Naichi was gone. Outside, darkness had settled completely. The camp was quieter. The black stallion occasionally shifted near the entrance, leather tack making a small sound. Clara crawled closer. Leo's face glistened with sweat. Clara touched his forehead. Still hot, but damp now. Is that good? It is not bad. Taza held a cup beneath the boy's lower lip. He kept down 3 swallows. Clara exhaled shakily. Then maybe he doesn't need the spring. Taza's silence answered before he did. He still needs it. Clara looked toward the entrance. The horse stood beyond the fire, black against black. Why don't you ride? Taza's expression changed slightly. I could. Then go. The soldiers are south. You know the land. Yes, you can outrun them. With that horse, maybe. Then go now, he continued looking at her. Clara felt anger rise. What? If I ride north, they will follow the horse, then lose them. The canyon path to the spring has 1 narrow entrance. If I bring 40 soldiers there, no one gets water. Then what are you saying? Taza looked at the black stallion. I stay. Clara did not understand. You swear? Here first. Then leave signs. Vance follows me. And the water? You ride for it. For a second, Clara thought she had misheard. She looked down at the heavy buckskin around her feet. I can barely stand. You do not need to stand long. I can't ride that animal. You can learn enough. That horse will kill me before the fever does. Maybe. She stared at him. Taza's face remained calm. Clara almost threw the cup at him. You say maybe too often. It is still the honest word. The absurdity of it cracked something in her. A short, breathless laugh escaped. Taza's mouth moved at one corner. Then the seriousness returned. The stallion is called Kesh. Kesh, he does not like fear. That makes two of us. No, you are full of fear. Clara stiffened. Taza pointed toward Leo. Fear brought you 50 miles. Do not pretend you have none. Kesh does not need you fearless. He needs you clear. The distinction settled over her. How long would the ride take? 2 hours there if you do not lose the trail. More coming back because the horse will tire. And Leo? Taza checked the boy's pulse. He has until late morning, perhaps noon, perhaps, maybe the honest words. Clara rubbed both hands over her face. When? At first light. Why not now? You do not know the path. Moonlight will turn white stone into false trails. What if the soldiers arrive before dawn? Then I make them look somewhere else. Clara studied him. You are giving me your horse. I am lending him, if they catch you. Taza shrugged. You return Kesh to Naichi. That is not what I asked. No, what happens if they catch you? His gaze went to the fire. Chains. Fort. Maybe east. And you're willing to risk that for a child you met tonight? Taza's expression sharpened. I did not meet only a child. He nodded toward Clara's feet. I saw your road. She looked down. That does not make you owe me. No. Then why? For the first time, Taza seemed to search for words. My mother had a daughter before me, he said. The child became sick during a winter move. Soldiers would not let the family stop near water because they said the camp had orders to keep moving. My mother carried the girl for 2 days. She died before they reached the next place. Clara said nothing. I was not born yet, Taza continued. But my mother spoke of the weight until the year she died. Some burdens live in a family longer than the person who carried them. He looked at Leo. I know what it means when people with rules decide a child has become inconvenient. The fire cracked. Clara swallowed against a tight throat. What was her name? Lucian. I'll remember. Taza gave a small nod. Outside, Kesh stamped. Taza stood, then remembered by learning the lesson began in darkness. Clara could not walk to the horse, so Taza brought Kesh to the entrance. Up close, the animal seemed impossibly large. He was black except for a faint white scar on the shoulder. His coat smelled of warm dust and sweat. His nostrils widened when he smelled Clara. Kesh pulled his head away. He knows I'm wrong, Clara said. He knows you are new. That is polite. Taza put the lead rope in her hand. Do not pull. What do I do? Breathe. I have been doing that all day. Badly. Clara gave him a look. Taza ignored it. He had her stand with one hand against the horse's neck while keeping weight off her left foot. Kesh trembled under the skin. Clara felt power in the animal that made her instinctively lean away. Stay, Taza said. I am staying. Your body is leaving. Clara forced her shoulders down. Kesh blew warm air across her hair. Taza told her to exhale near the horse's muzzle. She felt foolish, but she did it. Kesh sniffed. Again, the horse's eye found hers. Say his name, Taza said. Kesh. The ear nearest her turned. Again, Kesh. Taza taught her 3 sounds. One to go, one to slow, one to stop. He corrected the position of her knees and showed her how to lean with the horse instead of bracing against motion. The first time Clara attempted to mount, her feet failed. She slid back down and nearly struck the ground. Taza caught her under the arms. Pain flared so hard she saw sparks. I can't. Taza steadied her. You walked 50 miles. That was walking. Yes, this is a horse. Yes, I know how walking works. You learned that too. Clara hated him for being right. She tried again. This time Taza made a loop from rawhide so she could use her stronger leg and arms rather than push from both feet. She pulled herself upward, chest sliding over the saddle, then twisted into place. Kesh immediately sidestepped. Clara grabbed the pommel. Stop him. You stop him. I don't remember the word. You do. The horse moved again. Clara's heart raced. Taza did not touch the reins. She forced herself to breathe. Then she gave the long hushing sound he had taught her. Kesh stopped. Clara stared down. Taza looked up. Again. For the next hour, she moved the horse in a small circle around the camp. Start. Stop. Turn. Lean. Do not yank the reins. Do not clamp both knees in panic. Trust the animal's balance. Use the body before the hands. By the end, sweat had soaked Clara's collar despite the cold. Kesh's breathing remained calm. Leo slept inside under Naichi's watch. Clara dismounted badly but stayed upright. Taza checked the horizon. A pale haze lay to the southeast under moonlight. Dust. Vance? Clara asked. Taza nodded. Why would he care about me? He has Miller's report. How do you know? 2 days ago, a scout asked at a sheep camp about a white woman with a sick boy. Naichi's nephew heard. Clara's stomach tightened. Silas sent soldiers after us? He sent a report. Vance chose what it meant. What will he do if he finds Leo? Take him back to quarantine. No. Taza looked at her. The single word was enough. He will have to go through me. Clara laughed softly, exhausted. That's what I said about the whole town. And you left instead. Yes, sometimes leaving is how you stand. Near dawn, Clara sat beside Leo while Taza prepared 2 flasks and wrapped them in wet buckskin to keep the metal cooler. He drew a map in dust with a stick, north from camp until you see 3 black rocks like teeth. Take the wash between the second and third. Follow it until the walls turn white. Clara repeated it. Then, the wash forks. Left side is wider and wrong. Take the narrow right branch. Why would the wider one be wrong? It ends in salt flats. Good to know. After the fork, listen for water. You may not see it until you are near. How much do I bring? Both flasks full. Can Kesh drink it? A little, not much. It is bitter. Clara looked at the child. His face was damp. His fever still burned, but his breathing had not worsened during the night. Can I say goodbye? She asked. Taza's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. Do not speak as if you are going to die. I am riding a horse I met 4 hours ago through a canyon while soldiers chased the man who lent him to me. That is not dying. What is it? Morning. Clara shook her head. She bent over Leo. Sweetheart. His eyes fluttered. Mama, I have to go get water. No, I'll come back. His weak hand caught her sleeve. No leave. The words almost ended her. Clara touched her forehead to his. I already carried you to the man with the black horse, remember? Leo breathed against her cheek. Fast horse. Yes, black, yes. I'm going to ride him. I need you to stay here and make Taza work. Leo's eyelids lifted a little. Taza. The name came out clearer than it had in the wash. Clara smiled. That's right. She kissed him. When she turned, Taza was looking away. Outside, the eastern sky had begun to pale. Kesh stood saddled. Taza helped Clara mount. This time she needed less lifting. He secured the flasks and a small water skin behind the saddle. Then he placed his hand against Kesh's neck. The horse lowered its head slightly. For a moment, Taza and the stallion seemed to speak without sound. Clara understood then how much he was surrendering. Not just an animal, a history of escapes, a way home, a moving piece of freedom in a territory that measured freedom with fences. You can still come, Clara said. No, we could both ride. Kesh would be slower, we might still. No, the answer was gentle. Taza stepped back. Bring the water. Clara gripped the reins. What will you do? Make Vance look east. With what horse? My feet still work. She looked at him, then at her own bandaged feet. The dark humor of it passed between them. Taza. Yes, if I get back and you're gone. Give Leo the water. That isn't what I was going to say. I know. He touched 2 fingers to Kesh's cheek. Go, Clara gave the starting command. The stallion surged forward. The first 10 strides nearly tore her from the saddle. Then she remembered. Lean, breathe, move with him. The camp fell behind. Wind struck her face. For the first time in 3 days, distance began disappearing faster than she could count it. At first, Clara thought speed would feel like relief. It did not. It felt like violence. Kesh stretched beneath her in great, rolling strides that turned the earth into a rushing blur. Every impact traveled through the saddle into Clara's hips and up her spine. Her damaged feet, wrapped thickly and kept high against the stirrups, throbbed with each jolt. She nearly pulled the reins too hard at the first dry wash. Kesh's head came up. Clara remembered Taza's warning and loosened her hands. The stallion chose his own line down the bank, hooves sliding, then gathered himself and climbed the other side in 3 powerful leaps. Clara gasped. Kesh snorted as though offended by her surprise. Fine, she muttered. You know more than I do. The horse's ears flicked back. She took that as agreement. The morning sun climbed behind her. With the wind on her face, Clara could almost forget the heat until they slowed through rough country, and it returned all at once. She watched for the 3 black rocks. For several miles, every formation looked like teeth. Then she saw them, 3 basalt spires standing together on a ridge, dark against pale sky. Second and third, she whispered. Kesh turned with pressure from her knee more readily than from the rain. They entered the wash. The ground narrowed. Black rock gave way to lighter stone. Heat collected between canyon walls. Clara kept repeating Taza's directions. 3 teeth, wash, fork, narrow right. At the fork, the left branch looked easy. The right was a slit between pale walls barely wide enough for Kesh. Every instinct told Clara to take the open route. She pulled the horse toward the right. Kesh resisted. Don't argue. The horse tossed his head. Taza said right. Kesh did not know Taza's English name in that tone, but perhaps he knew the tension in Clara's body. He stepped into the narrow passage. The canyon walls changed from rust to chalky ivory. White deposits crusted the rocks. Sunlight reflected from them with painful brightness. Clara squinted until tears ran from her eyes. She heard nothing but Kesh's breathing and the click of hooves. Then, faintly, water, not a stream, a steady drip. Kesh heard it too, his head lifted. They followed the sound around a bend. The spring appeared almost disappointingly small. Water seeped from a crack in the limestone into a basin rimmed by white mineral crust. It was clear enough to show every pale stone beneath the surface. Clara slid from the saddle. Her feet hit the ground. Pain dropped her to both knees. For several breaths she could not move. Kesh stood beside her, sides heaving. Clara crawled to the spring. The water was shockingly cold. She plunged both hands in and cried out. After days of heat, the cold felt sharp enough to cut. She filled the first flask, then the second. The metal chilled in her hands. Clara stared at the clear liquid. It looked like nothing. No glow, no miracle, no proof, just water from stone. Please, she whispered. It was the first prayer she had spoken since leaving Oakhaven, not to the town's god. Not to anyone in particular, just a word released into the canyon. Please. She drank 2 mouthfuls from her own skin, then offered Kesh a little spring water in her cupped palms. The horse sniffed and drank cautiously. Bitter? Kesh blew across her hands. Mine too. She let him drink ordinary water after that. The stallion was tired now. Foam had gathered under the saddle blanket. Clara loosened the cinch for several minutes and walked her hands over his legs the way Owen used to after long rides. She found no swelling, only heat and effort. You don't get to die either, she told him. Kesh lowered his head. Clara looked toward the canyon mouth. The ride back would not have the freshness of the ride in. The horse had spent strength, so had she, and somewhere beyond the pale walls Captain Vance was closing on Taza. She tightened the saddle again. Mounting took 3 attempts. On the second, she slipped and tore open a cut in her palm. Blood streaked the black mane. On the third, she hauled herself high enough to swing into place. Home, she said. The word surprised her. She did not mean Oakhaven. She meant the wickiup where Leo was breathing. Kesh turned south. They left the spring at a controlled pace. Clara did not push him until the ground opened. Then she gave the command. Kesh ran. Back at the camp, Taza heard the cavalry before he saw it. Nachi had taken 2 horses and the few other people staying nearby into a side canyon before dawn. Taza had insisted. If Vance wanted a fugitive, there was no reason to give him a village. Now the camp held only Taza, Leo, several empty shelters, and the tracks he had deliberately made eastward before circling back. He had spent an hour laying the false trail. He walked heavily where the ground held prints. He broke branches at shoulder height. He left one strip from an old buckskin shirt caught on thorn. Then he climbed over stone where no tracks remained and returned to Leo by a different route. Vance's scouts would see what Taza wanted them to see. A man moving east on foot, perhaps toward caves in the rimrock. It might by an hour, perhaps 2. Inside, Leo's breathing had become quieter. Not better, quieter. Taza disliked that more. The child no longer fought the compresses. His body seemed to have withdrawn into itself. Taza checked his pulse, fast and weak. He replaced the damp cloth at Leo's neck. Your mother is riding a difficult horse, he said. Leo did not answer. Taza ground dried root with a stone. She argues with everything. I think the horse will bring her back simply to get rid of her. Leo's eyelids moved. Taza looked at him, no true waking. Still, he continued talking. Her feet look worse than a coyote's after winter ice. Naichi says she is foolish. A tiny sound came from Leo. Taza leaned closer. Mama, yes, the boy's lips barely moved. Your mother. Horse. Taza looked toward the entrance. Yes, my horse. Fast. Despite himself, Taza smiled. Too fast for this old country. The child slipped back into fevered sleep. A bugle sounded outside. Taza's smile disappeared. He rose. Captain Elias Vance had been in the army long enough to distrust anything that happened easily. The trail east had been easy. Too easy. His scouts had found footprints, broken brush, and a strip of buckskin. Vance followed for 3 miles before the tracks vanished on basalt. He stood over the last print and felt irritation harden into respect he did not want. The man had played him. Back to the camp, Vance ordered. One lieutenant looked surprised. Sir, he's in the rocks. He wants us to think so. Why? Vance looked toward the pale ravines in the north. Because something else matters more. They rode back hard. Vance's anger had little to do with Clara Thorne herself. That was the truth he avoided naming. When Silas Miller's report reached the fort, it described a contagious child removed from quarantine by his mother. It also noted rumors that she was seeking an Apache healer. To Vance, the report joined several existing concerns. Taza's repeated evasion, settlers trading with people outside army control, and the embarrassing fact that one man on one black horse had escaped 3 patrols in 18 months. The army called it order. Vance believed in order. He had seen what happened when disease entered a post. 12 soldiers dead in a month at Fort Grant, 2 infants buried behind officers' quarters. His own younger brother had died of cholera on a riverboat before Elias joined the army. Disease did not care about courage. That memory had made Miller's report feel urgent, but urgency over years had become something else in Vance, a need to make every uncertain thing obey. The desert refused. Taza refused. Now Clara Thorne had refused too. By late morning, the cavalry reached the camp. Taza stood outside the wickiup. He carried no rifle. Vance drew his bay to a stop 10 yards away. Dust rolled around the horse's legs. "Where is the woman?" Taza said nothing. "Clara Thorne, where is she?" Taza looked at the captain's horse, then at the men behind him. Vance dismounted. "You understand me?" "Yes," then answer, "No." Vance's jaw tightened. One of the troopers shifted in his saddle. Vance stepped closer. "The child is under quarantine order. He is under a blanket." A few men glanced at one another. Vance did not smile. "You think this is amusing?" "No. Where is the mother?" Taza looked north. That was enough for Vance. He followed the gaze. White canyons. Taza said nothing. Vance understood the black stallion. Taza remained still. A new kind of anger crossed Vance's face. He had expected Taza to run on that horse. Every patrol report described the stallion as the reason capture failed. "You gave her your mount." "Yes, why?" Taza looked toward the shelter. A faint cough came from inside. The soldiers heard it. Vance's expression shifted for only a second. Then duty returned. "I'm taking the boy back." "No, you do not have authority here." Taza's gaze moved across the empty landscape. "Neither does fever." Vance stepped forward. "I am not debating philosophy with you." "Step aside." Taza did not move. The captain motioned. 2 soldiers dismounted. Before they reached the entrance, a young trooper named Ben Hollis heard Leo struggle for breath. Hollis stopped. The sound was familiar. His baby sister had made the same sound during pneumonia in Illinois. He looked at Vance. "Sir." Vance turned. "Hold position." "Sir, maybe the doctor." "There is no doctor here." Hollis looked at Taza. Taza's face gave nothing. Vance's patience thinned. "Move." The 2 soldiers started again. Taza raised one hand, not as a threat, as a request. "Quiet." The word stopped them more effectively than a weapon might have. Taza pointed toward the shelter. "He needs quiet." Vance stared at him. Then the bugler's horse tossed its head, bit jangling loudly. Leo coughed again. Vance turned sharply. "Back the horses 20 yards." No one questioned the order. The line shifted. Taza watched. Something had opened, small and temporary, in the captain's certainty. Vance saw that he had noticed. "Do not mistake this for permission," he said. Taza nodded. "I do not." Inside, Leo's pulse weakened further. Taza returned to him. Vance remained outside. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The soldiers drank from canteens. Horses lowered their heads. No one left. Vance could have ordered Taza restrained. He could have carried Leo out. But the situation no longer looked like Miller's report. There was no reckless mother spreading sickness through a settlement. There was a single child inside a shelter, near death, with a man keeping cool cloths on his neck. Vance hated when facts became complicated after orders had been given. Around noon, Taza stepped outside. Vance rose from the rock where he had been sitting. "Well?" "Still alive. Where is Mrs. Thorne?" Taza looked north again. "Still alive, I hope." Vance studied him. "You could have been gone." "Yes. Why are you still here?" Taza's expression suggested the question was unnecessary. Vance followed his glance to the shelter. "You expect me to believe you surrendered your horse for that boy." "I did not surrender it." "You lent it to a woman who may not return." "She will return." "You sound sure." "I saw her feet." Vance frowned. Taza said nothing more. The captain looked at the bloody cloth strips discarded near the fire. He had not noticed them earlier. Some were stiff with dried blood. "How far did she walk?" "From Oakhaven." Vance knew the distance. His gaze went toward the southern horizon. "On foot?" Taza nodded. Vance looked away. For the first time, the black cross in Miller's report felt less like a public health measure and more like the beginning of something cruel. But Vance was still an officer. Taza was still wanted. Understanding did not erase orders. It only made them heavier. In the north, Clara was discovering how much slower a tired horse could make hope feel. Kesh still ran, but the stride had shortened. His breathing came loud and deep. Foam had dried white along the reins. Clara stopped twice to walk him in the shade of narrow cuts, though dismounting meant crawling back into the saddle afterward. Every minute she rested him felt stolen from Leo. Every minute she pushed him felt stolen from Taza. The impossible arithmetic of survival had returned. At the 3 black rocks, Clara checked the sun. Too high, she urged Kesh south. The stallion responded, but not with the explosive power of morning. Come on, she whispered, just get us home. She used the word again. Home. Kesh's ears moved. The first sign of the camp was dust. Not cooking smoke, dust. A wide cloud hanging above the southern flats. Clara's stomach tightened. Cavalry. She could turn west and try to circle. That would take time. She looked at the flasks strapped across the saddle. No, straight in. As she topped the last ridge, she saw blue uniforms, dozens of them. The camp looked small inside the ring of men and horses. Kesh felt the change in her body and slowed. Clara leaned forward. Not now. She gave Taza's starting command. The stallion surged. The soldiers heard them before they saw them, heads turned. Horses shifted. A trooper shouted. Captain Vance stepped into the open. Kesh came down the slope like a storm, rolling off black. Don't shoot, someone yelled. Vance raised his arm. Hold fire! The line split unevenly. Kesh drove through the opening between 2 mounted men. Clara pulled him down into a hard stop near the wickiup. The stallion's hindquarters slid in dust. Red grit rose around them. Clara almost fell as she dismounted. Her feet hit the earth and folded. She caught herself on one hand. Taza came from the shelter. Clara tore the nearest flask loose. Here? He took it. Both? She pointed to the second. Taza removed it. Kesh stood with his head low, sides heaving. Taza placed one hand on the horse's neck. His expression changed. Too hard? Clara asked. He came back. It was not an answer, but Clara understood. So did I. Taza looked at her. Yes. Then he disappeared inside. Vance approached. Clara sat in the dust because standing was impossible. The captain stopped 3 paces away. Mrs. Thorne. She looked up. His uniform was coated in dust. He looked less impressive from the ground than he probably intended. Captain, you have caused considerable trouble. Clara laughed. It hurt her cracked lips. Did Silas write that too? Vance's expression tightened. You removed a contagious child from quarantine. I removed my son from a shed where you expected him to die. The order was meant to protect the settlement. Then the settlement should feel very protected. We're 70 miles away. A few soldiers heard. One looked down to hide a smile. Vance did not. You sought aid from a wanted fugitive. I sought aid from the first man who kept working after your doctor quit. Miller is not my doctor. He used your soldiers. Vance absorbed the accusation. Clara pointed toward Taza's shelter. That man gave me his horse when he knew you were coming. I am aware. He could have run. Yes. He stayed with my son. Yes. Then whatever paper you brought should be ashamed of itself. Vance looked at her for a long moment. You think law changes because someone behaves nobly? No. Clara's voice softened. I think people do, sometimes. The captain's face gave nothing. Inside, Taza worked with the mineral water. He did not pour it freely. Leo was too weak for that. He touched a spoonful to the boy's lips and waited, no swallow. Taza pressed gently beneath the jaw and tried again. A drop entered. Leo coughed. Taza turned his head and cleared the airway. Another drop. This time the throat moved. Taza waited. Then another. Outside, Clara heard nothing. Waiting was worse than walking, and worse than riding because it gave her no task. She crawled to the entrance and sat with her back against a cedar post. Kesh stood nearby. A young soldier had removed the saddle and was walking the stallion slowly, following Taza's shouted instruction. Clara noticed the soldier's careful hands. His name is Kesh, she said. The trooper looked over. Ma'am, the horse, Kesh. The soldier nodded. He's something. He saved 2 people today. The soldier looked toward the shelter, maybe 3. Clara followed his gaze toward Taza. Yes, she said. Maybe 3. The sun lowered. The cavalry remained. No one spoke loudly now. A strange truce settled over the camp. Some soldiers watered their horses. One heated coffee but did not offer any to Clara until another man nudged him and said, Give her the cup. Clara accepted it. The coffee was terrible, scorched and thick with grounds. She drank every drop. Captain Vance watched from a distance. When twilight reached the base of the canyon, Taza finally came outside. Clara was on her feet before pain could stop her. She took 2 steps and nearly fell. Vance caught her elbow. The contact surprised both of them. He released her once she steadied. Taza looked at Clara. He swallowed. She stared. Is the fever down? Some? Will he live? Taza's face remained careful. He is not dead, Taza. A faint softness entered his eyes. He is turning toward us. Clara covered her mouth. She went inside. Leo lay beneath a thin blanket. His skin was still hot, but the violent flush had eased. Sweat dampened his hair. Clara knelt beside him. She touched his cheek. Leo. His eyes opened, not wide, not strong, but clear. He looked at her. Mama. The word broke the last hard thing inside her. Clara bent over him and cried without sound. Her shoulders shook. Tears cut clean lines through the dust on her face. Leo lifted one weak hand and touched her cheek. Water. Clara laughed through the tears. Yes. Taza handed her a cup. Slow. She held it to Leo's lips. He drank, only 3 sips. They were the most beautiful sound Clara had ever heard. Behind her, boots shifted at the entrance. Captain Vance stood there. He saw the child drink. He saw Taza watching the boy's throat. He saw Clara's bandaged feet beneath her torn skirt. For several seconds, the captain said nothing. Then he stepped back outside. The victory lasted less than 10 minutes. Vance gave Taza until Leo fell into natural sleep. Then he approached with iron shackles. Clara saw them before Taza did. No. Taza looked at her. Vance stopped. Mrs. Thorne, no. He is under arrest. He saved my son. That is not in dispute. Then don't do this. I have orders. Clara stepped between them. Her feet screamed. She stayed upright. Orders from who? The Department of Arizona. Are they here? No. Did they see what he did? No. Then you saw more than they did. Vance's jaw worked. You ask whether free people change, he said quietly. That is not the same as authority changing. Then use yours. I do not have the authority to erase his warrants. You have the authority not to put iron on him tonight. The soldiers had gone still. Vance looked around, aware of every witness. Taza touched Clara's shoulder. Move. She turned on him. No. Move, Clara. It was the first time he had used her name. She stared. Taza held out his hands toward Vance. The gesture was deliberate. Clara's throat tightened. You knew. Yes, when you gave me Kesh. Yes, you knew this would happen. I knew it could. Clara's anger became grief so quickly she could not separate them. You had no right, Taza almost smiled. To give my horse? To make me carry this too? The smile disappeared. I am sorry. The word surprised her because earlier he had said sorry did not bring anyone home. Clara shook her head. No, you're not. No, Vance waited. Finally, Clara stepped aside. The shackles closed around Taza's wrists. The click was quieter than Silas Miller's hammer had been. It felt louder. Taza looked down at the iron around his wrists, not with fear but with the practical attention he gave every tool. The cuffs were too tight on the right side. He rotated his hand once. Captain Vance noticed. Sergeant, loosen that 1 notch. The sergeant hesitated. Sir, 1 notch. The man obeyed. Taza glanced at Vance. The captain did not meet his eyes. Clara saw the exchange. It was not mercy. Not yet. It was simply the first crack in something rigid. Leo slept through it all. The soldiers did not leave that night. Vance had originally intended to march Taza back toward the fort at once. But the horses were tired, the light was gone, and several men had seen enough of Leo's condition to make a night departure seem needlessly harsh. The official reason Vance gave was logistics. No movement before dawn, he ordered. Clara understood the gift hidden inside the dry wording. Taza would have 1 more night near the boy he had saved. He would also have 1 more night with Kesh. The stallion stood beyond the outer fire, washed down and blanketed. The young trooper, Hollis, had followed Taza's instructions carefully. Kesh's breathing had slowed. His legs trembled only slightly. Taza walked to him under guard. The chain between his cuffs made a soft metallic sound. Kesh heard it. The horse's head came up. For the first time since Clara had known the animal, he made a noise she could only call grief. It was low, almost beneath hearing. Taza stopped. The guard beside him looked uncomfortable. Can I take these off while he sees to the horse? Hollis asked Vance. The captain looked at Taza, then at the stallion. No. Hollis lowered his eyes. Vance waited a second. Unhook the center chain from the waist belt. Give him room. Again, not mercy, exactly. A technical adjustment. Taza approached Kesh. The stallion pressed his muzzle against Taza's chest. Taza put both shackled hands over the horse's face. He spoke softly in Chiricahua. Clara could not understand the words. She did not need to. There were tones people used with children, with the dying, with animals that had carried them home. Language was secondary. Kesh breathed into Taza's shirt. The healer inspected the horse's legs, rubbed down the tendons, checked the hooves for cracks, and lifted the saddle blanket to make sure no sores had formed. Even in chains, he worked. Clara sat beside Leo at the entrance to the wickiup and watched. She thought of Owen oiling tools after a 12-hour shift underground. A good worker did not stop respecting the thing that had carried the burden just because the job was finished. After several minutes, Taza rested his forehead against Kesh's. Then he stepped away. The stallion tried to follow. The lead rope stopped him. Taza did not turn back. Clara looked down before the horse could make that low sound again. Later, when most of the soldiers had settled around small fires, Vance came to sit several yards from Clara. He held a tin cup of coffee. She did not invite him closer. He did not ask. For a time they listened to the desert cool. A coyote called from somewhere high in the rocks. Leo breathed softly behind Clara. Vance rubbed one thumb along the rim of his cup. Miller's report said the boy had been ordered removed to the quarantine structure by sundown. Clara stared at the fire. I know. It did not describe the structure. No. Is it as poor as you said? Worse. Vance's mouth tightened. He wrote that you rejected treatment. Clara turned. I rejected a shed. He wrote that he had exhausted available treatment. That part may be true. The answer seemed to surprise him. Clara looked back at the flames. Silas was afraid. I don't think he wanted Leo dead. That is generous. It isn't. She folded her hands in her lap. Wanting someone to live and being willing to stand near them while they might die are different things. Vance said nothing. Clara continued, quieter. He stopped being Leo's doctor before he admitted it to himself. Then the town made him their messenger. And you chose a man wanted by the army. I chose the only direction where someone was still willing to try. Vance looked toward Taza, who sat under guard beside another fire. His record is not clean. I didn't ask if it was. He has aided men who fled government custody. Were they sick children? No. Then I still don't know enough to judge them. Vance gave a short breath that might have been a laugh if he had allowed it. You have strong opinions for a woman who can barely stand. My feet are injured. My opinions are healthy. This time the captain did smile briefly. Then the smile faded. I cannot release him. Clara felt the anger return. I know. I need you to understand that. No. You need yourself to understand it. Vance stared at the fire. Clara regretted the cruelty of the sentence almost immediately. She did not apologize. After a while, Vance said, My brother died of cholera when I was 17. Clara looked at him. He was 11. Riverboat from St. Louis. By the time they understood what it was, 3 decks were sick. Men broke doors trying to get off at the next landing. 2 were shot by guards. His voice stayed level. I learned very young that panic can kill as efficiently as disease. Clara waited. So when Miller's report came, Vance continued, I saw a mother carrying contagion out of a marked house. I saw a settlement that could be lost because one person refused an order. And now? Vance looked at the small shelter behind her. Now I see the report did not contain everything. That is a careful sentence. I am a careful man. Clara looked at his saber resting beside him. No. You are a man who likes straight lines. Vance's eyes met hers. The observation struck home. After a moment, he nodded. Yes, the desert doesn't. No. They sat in silence again. Near midnight, Leo woke hungry. Clara nearly laughed when he asked for bread. Taza allowed only a little broth and a piece softened until it nearly dissolved. Leo complained weakly. The complaint delighted everyone except Leo. More, he demanded. Tomorrow, Taza said. You said water. I gave water. Bread. Tomorrow. Leo frowned at him with the deep moral outrage of a 4-year-old. Clara covered her mouth. Taza's expression remained solemn. You see, he told her. The fever is losing. He has strength to be difficult. Clara laughed so hard she began crying again. Even Vance, standing outside, looked away with a smile. By dawn, Leo's temperature had fallen further. He was weak and pale, but he could drink without coughing every time. His breathing still carried congestion, yet the awful pauses had shortened. Taza listened to his chest. Not finished, he said. Clara's hope tightened. What does he need? Water, small food, cool cloth. Watch the breathing. For how long? Days? Can he travel? Taza looked at Vance outside. Not 50 miles on your back. Vance entered. I have a supply wagon 4 miles south, he said. We can bring it here. Clara looked at him. The quarantine order will be reviewed. Reviewed? It is what I can say now. That shed will kill him. He will not be placed in the shed. The certainty of the statement stopped her. Vance continued. I will write that he requires supervised isolation in his own home until a physician clears him. 2 men can remain outside if necessary. Clara stared. You can do that? I can recommend it strongly enough that Miller will not challenge me. A bitter answer rose to her tongue. She swallowed it. Thank you. Vance nodded once. Then he looked at Taza. The two men stood in the same small space, one with chains, one with authority. Clara wished gratitude toward Vance did not have to exist beside rage at what he was about to do. But life had become full of truths that refused to stay separate. Taza crouched beside Leo. The boy looked at the shackles. What that? Taza lifted his wrists slightly. Iron. Why? No one answered quickly. Leo looked at Clara. Mama? Clara felt every adult in the shelter waiting for her choice of words. Taza has to go with the soldiers. Why? Because the soldiers have rules. Leo frowned. He doctor. The Taza is a healer. Stay. Taza sat back on his heels. Not today. Leo's face tightened. Clara knew that look. Tears were coming. Taza reached into the pouch at his belt. Vance tensed, then relaxed when he saw what Taza removed. A small carved piece of wood. A horse. Blackened from smoke and handling, simple in shape, one leg slightly shorter than the others. Taza gave it to Leo. The child turned it over in his hands. Horse, yes. Black? Taza looked at Clara. She smiled through tears. Very black, she said. Fast, Leo whispered. Taza nodded. Fast. Leo held the carving against his chest. Clara thought of the broken wooden horse still hanging on the wall in Oakhaven, one waiting at the place they had fled, one given at the place her son had been returned to her. The symmetry hurt. When the cavalry prepared to leave, Vance did one more thing that was not in his orders. He left Hollis and another soldier behind with a mule and instructions to escort Clara and Leo slowly toward the supply wagon after Leo had rested another 6 hours. Taza stood between two mounted guards. His hands were shackled but not tied to a saddle. Vance had refused that too. The black stallion was led beside the column. Clara limped out holding Leo. The child rested on her hip, lighter than he should have been but alive. Taza stopped when he reached her. The guard allowed it. Clara wanted to say thank you. The words felt worthless. She wanted to say she would repay him. That felt insulting. She wanted to promise she would get him free. She had no power to make such a promise. So she said the only true thing she had. He'll know your name. Taza looked at Leo. That is enough. No, Clara said. It isn't, but it is what I can give today. He nodded. Leo lifted the wooden horse. Kesh. Taza's eyes moved to the stallion. Yes, the horse pulled once against the soldier holding him. Taza stepped close and touched his face with both chained hands. Kesh became still. Taza whispered a few words. Then he released him. Vance mounted. The column began moving south. Clara stood until dust swallowed the last blue coat. Taza did not look back. Neither did Kesh. But for a long time, Clara could hear the stallion's hoofbeats among the others, a deeper rhythm she had learned well enough to recognize. 6 hours later, Hollis helped Clara lift Leo into the supply wagon. The wagon smelled of canvas, grain sacks, old rope, and axle grease. It was not comfortable, it was magnificent. Clara lay on folded blankets with Leo beside her. For the first time since leaving Oakhaven, she traveled without carrying him. Her arms did not know what to do. They kept curling as though searching for the missing weight. Leo solved the problem by taking one of her hands and placing it over his chest. The heartbeat beneath her palm was slower now, steady. Clara closed her eyes. The wagon rolled south. They reached Oakhaven late the following afternoon. Word had arrived before them. People were waiting. Clara saw faces along the road. Women from the well, Ezra the blacksmith, Reverend Pike. Children pulled back by anxious mothers. Men from the board standing outside the mercantile. No one knew where to look. The wagon stopped in front of Clara's house. The black cross remained on the door. Leo saw it. What that? He asked. Clara stared at the charred cedar. A mistake. Hollis climbed down. He read the sealed order Vance had given him. Mrs. Thorne and her son are to remain in their residence under supervised isolation. No removal to the creek structure is authorized. Dr. Miller is directed to examine the child from appropriate distance and report daily. Appropriate distance? Clara almost smiled. Silas Miller stood at the edge of the crowd. His face had gone pale. Hollis finished reading. No one moved. Then Ezra Cole walked toward the porch. He stopped 2 steps from Clara. I'll take that down. He pointed at the black cross. Clara looked at him. Ezra's shame from the morning she left had not disappeared. It sat openly on his face now. No, Clara said. He blinked. She handed Leo to Hollis. The soldier accepted him awkwardly. Clara limped onto the porch. Each step hurt, but not enough to stop her. She took Ezra's claw hammer from his belt without asking. The first nail resisted. Clara wedged the claw under the head and pulled. Wood creaked. The nail came free. The second took longer. By the third, sweat had formed on her forehead. No one offered help. They understood. The fourth nail came out with a sharp squeal. Clara caught the cross before it fell. She held it in both hands. The cedar was lighter than she expected. She walked to the chopping block beside the house, placed the cross on it, raised Ezra's hammer. One blow split the vertical piece. Another broke the horizontal arm. She did not make a speech. She carried the pieces inside and fed them to the stove. The blackened cedar caught quickly. Leo watched the flames from Hollis's arms. "Fire," he said. "Yes," Clara answered. Then she took her son back. Silas came to the door after dusk. Hollis made him 6 feet away. The doctor looked exhausted. Clara opened the door but did not invite him in. "How is he?" Silas asked. "Alive, I heard. You heard correctly." Silas looked past her toward the bed where Leo slept. "The fever?" "Lower." "Breathing?" "Better." Silas swallowed. What did the healer do? The question contained curiosity, professional pride, and something that sounded like shame. Clara considered refusing. Then she remembered Taza's hand's measuring drops. He cooled him, kept steam near him so he could breathe easier, gave him small amounts of water instead of forcing a cup, used mineral spring water from the White Canyons, watched him all night. Silas listened carefully. Anything else? He did not decide Leo was already dead. Silas flinched. Clara almost regretted that one too. Almost. He removed his hat. "I was afraid." "Yes. I thought moving him away from town was the responsible thing. You thought moving him away from your eyes would make the fear easier to bear." Silas looked down. "I did." The admission changed the air between them. Clara leaned against the doorframe because her feet were throbbing. Silas noticed. "What happened to your feet?" "I walked." "How far?" "You know." His face tightened. "I did not think you would actually go. That was part of the problem." Silas nodded slowly. "I want to examine Leo when it's safe." "You can." He looked up, surprised. "You still trust me?" "No." Clara's answer was calm. "But you know things I don't. Trust can be rebuilt if the work is good." Silas stood in the dark for a long moment. Then he put his hat back on. "I'll come tomorrow. Bring clean linen." He nodded. "And Silas," he stopped. "The quarantine shed comes down. I don't control that. Then decide whether you're going to be afraid of the board too." Clara closed the door. The next weeks were quiet. Leo recovered slowly. The fever left him weak enough that walking across the room became an achievement. His appetite returned before his strength. He demanded biscuits, apples, eggs, and once an entire pie. Clara gave him broth and soft bread and ignored his protests. Her own feet healed even more slowly. For nearly a month she used Owen's old walking stick. New skin formed pink and tender over the worst cuts. Some sensation took weeks to return. One toe remained numb through winter. Life in Oakhaven did not transform overnight. That would have been too easy. Some people crossed the street when Clara approached, long after Leo was no longer contagious. Fear had habits. Others tried to act as though nothing had happened. Clara found that harder to forgive. Ezra repaired her porch step without charging her. He also brought a new wheel for Leo's wooden horse. He did not apologize in words. Clara accepted the wheel. Reverend Pike began visiting the sick in person instead of sending prayers through relatives. The first time Clara saw him carry soup to a feverish miner, she said nothing. Silas convinced the board to tear down the quarantine shed by the creek and convert an unused storeroom near his clinic into a proper isolation room with a stove, sealed windows, clean bedding, and running buckets of fresh water. He paid for half the lumber himself. No one called it repentance. They called it improvement. Clara preferred that. Captain Vance sent one letter 3 months after Taza's arrest. It was addressed formally to Mrs. Clara Thorne. She opened it at the kitchen table while Leo pushed his repaired horse across the floor. The letter said Taza had been transferred to Fort Selden pending disposition of several warrants. Vance had filed a supplementary report documenting the circumstances of the arrest, including Taza's medical assistance to a settler child and his voluntary decision not to flee. The language was dry. One line mattered. "I cannot promise the report will change his sentence, but it will exist where the earlier papers did not." Clara read that line 3 times. At the bottom, Vance had added something in smaller handwriting. "The stallion is being cared for and has not been assigned to regular service." Clara folded the letter carefully. A year later, she learned Taza had been moved again, then again. Fort records traveled slowly and unreliably. Sometimes months passed without news. Clara wrote anyway. She sent short letters because she did not know which ones reached him. "Leo is strong enough to run now. Leo remembers the black horse. The isolation shed is gone. Silas washes his hands so often his knuckles crack. Ezra says that is justice. I still have the wooden horse you gave him. She never wrote thank you. The phrase felt too small. Instead, she sent evidence that the life Taza had chosen was continuing. When Leo turned 6, he began asking questions. Why was Taza in prison? Had Taza hurt someone? Why did soldiers arrest healers? Why had his mother carried him so far? Clara answered as carefully as she could. She did not turn Taza into a saint. She told Leo that good deeds did not erase a person's whole life, and bad laws did not make every person who enforced them evil. She told him Captain Vance had both arrested Taza and kept Leo out of the quarantine shed. She told him Dr. Miller had failed him, and later changed his clinic because of that failure. Mostly, she told him what she had seen. Taza stayed when he could have run. Why? Leo asked. Because you were sick, that's all. That was enough for him. Leo thought about that for several days. At 7, he began following Silas around the clinic. The doctor protested at first. He asks too many questions. So did I, Clara said. You still do. Then he comes by it honestly. Silas taught Leo simple things. How to boil instruments, how to clean a wound, how to count a pulse. Clara taught him which details people forgot to mention when they were afraid. Whether a patient had eaten, whether the room was too hot, whether water was close, who was caring for the caregiver. From a Mexican shepherd named Tomas, Leo learned the names of local plants. From Naichi, who came to Oakhaven twice over the next years to trade baskets and hides, he learned more. The first time Naichi entered town, half the street went quiet. Clara walked out of the mercantile and embraced her. That ended most of the staring. Naichi brought dried sage and a small packet of mullein. She also brought news. Taza alive, she said in careful English. Clara closed her eyes. Where? Fort Prison North. Gray walls. Can he receive visitors? Naichi lifted one shoulder. Sometimes. Leo, 9 years old then, stood beside Clara holding the black wooden horse. Did he make this? Naichi looked at the carving. Her face changed. She took it gently, ran one thumb over the short leg and laughed. Taza make bad horse. Leo looked offended. It's good. Naichi shook her head. Real horse better. Kesh? Her eyes lifted sharply. You know Kesh. My mother rode him. Naichi looked at Clara. Clara nodded. What happened to him? Leo asked. Naichi sat on the porch step. Kesh came back to people after soldiers keep him one winter. Captain Send. Clara stared. Vance sent him back? Naichi nodded. Papers say horse no use. Too difficult. Clara began laughing. Of course. Kesh had found one final way to refuse service. Leo smiled. Was he still fast? Naichi looked toward the open country beyond Oakhaven. Until old. Did he die? Yes. Leo's smile faded. Naichi handed him the carving. Fast life. Good life. That night Leo placed the wooden horse on the windowsill instead of dragging it across the floor. At 13, Leo was taller than Clara's shoulder. At 14, he could ride from Oakhaven to the first ridge and back before breakfast. At 15, he asked to visit Taza. Clara had expected the question for years. She was still not ready. Why now? Leo looked down at the letter in his hand. A response had finally come from the fort. Visitor request approved. One day only. I remember pieces, he said. The steam, a dark room, his hands, the horse. But I don't know what's real and what comes from hearing you tell it. Clara understood. Memory belonged partly to the person who lived it and partly to the people who repeated it afterward. What do you want from him? She asked. Leo thought. I don't know. That is a good reason to go. They traveled in spring, not on foot. Clara never again romanticized walking unnecessary miles. They took a wagon north, then horses along the military road. The country was familiar and changed. New fences cut some valleys. Telegraph poles stood beside roads that had not existed when Clara carried Leo through the dust. A rail spur had reached towns that once depended on mule freight, but the White Canyon still flashed pale in the distance. On the second day, Leo saw them and became quiet. That's where? Yes? The spring? Farther in. He looked at her feet in their ordinary boots. You walked all this? Most of it was uglier than this road. You never said how far it felt. I couldn't. They camped near a dry wash. Leo filled the kettle. Clara watched him kneel by the fire, broad-shouldered now, his hair darker than it had been as a child. For a moment she saw the 4-year-old again. Fever-bright and weightless in her arms, she looked away. The next morning they detoured to the White Canyons. Clara had not returned since the ride for the spring. She worried she would fail to find it. But the 3 black rocks remained, so did the narrow right fork. Leo rode behind her into the pale gorge. When they reached the spring, he dismounted slowly. The water still seeped from the limestone into the same small basin. No monument marked it. No sign announced that a child had lived because of water carried from there. Clara preferred it that way. Leo knelt and touched the surface. He jerked his hand back, cold. Clara smiled. Yes, they filled a canteen. Leo tasted one drop and made a face. That saved me, that and many other things. What other things? Work, timing, luck. A horse, a man who stayed. Leo sealed the canteen. He picked a small bundle of sage growing near the canyon mouth. For him? Clara asked. Leo nodded. The fort stood on gray ground beneath a hard blue sky. Its walls were thicker than Clara expected. The gate opened with the scrape of iron. A corporal checked their papers, searched the bundle, smelled the canteen, and finally allowed them into a visitor room divided by a heavy wooden table. Clara's hands began to shake. She hid them beneath the table. Leo noticed. You all right? No. He smiled slightly. Honest word? Clara looked at him. He had heard the story enough times to know. Honest word. Footsteps approached beyond the inner door. The door opened. Taza entered. 10 years had changed him. His hair, once black, was streaked heavily with gray. He was thinner. One shoulder sat lower than the other. A scar Clara did not remember crossed his forearm. But his eyes were the same. He saw Clara first. He stopped. For a moment neither moved. Then his gaze shifted to Leo. The boy he had treated was gone. In his place stood a young man nearly as tall as Taza had been, holding a bundle of sage and a tin canteen. Taza looked back at Clara. She nodded. This is Leo. Taza's face changed so slowly that Clara almost missed it. A smile appeared. Not the restrained half-smile she remembered. A real one. Leo swallowed. I don't know what to say. Taza sat at the table. Good. Leo looked startled. Taza's smile deepened. Too many words make a room crowded. Clara laughed. The sound felt like opening a door that had been stuck for years. Leo sat across from him. He placed the sage on the table. Nashi said you would know what kind. Taza picked it up, crushed one leaf between his fingers and smelled it. Wrong kind for fever. Leo's face fell. Taza glanced at Clara. Good kind for cooking rabbit. Leo began laughing. Clara covered her eyes. I told him to learn plants. Not well enough. I'm still learning, Leo said. Taza looked at him more closely. What do you do? I help Dr. Miller. The name erased some warmth from Taza's expression. Leo noticed. He changed. Taza said nothing. He did, Clara added. Not enough to erase what happened. Enough to make fewer people suffer because of it. Taza considered that. Good. Leo set the canteen on the table. This is from the White Canyons. Taza's hand stopped. He did not touch it immediately. Then he lifted the canteen. The metal was cool from the spring water inside. He opened it and smelled the mineral tang. His eyes closed for 1 second. Clara suddenly understood that she had brought more than water into the room. She had brought a piece of open country through stone walls. Taza drank. Only one mouthful. Then he handed it to Leo. You drink. Leo obeyed and made the same face he had at the spring. Taza laughed. Still bitter, Leo said. Stone does not change because you grow older. Leo turned the canteen in his hands. I remember asking for water. Taza nodded. I remember you refusing bread. I would never refuse bread. You were very sick. Leo looked at Clara. She smiled. He's right. For the next hour they talked in fragments. Not about grand things. Leo asked about Kesh. Taza asked whether Oakhaven still smelled like coal smoke in winter. Clara told him the quarantine shed was gone. Taza told her Naichi had written once about Kesh refusing every army rider until Vance declared the animal unsuitable. Vance really sent him back? Clara asked. Yes. Why didn't he tell me? Taza shrugged. Careful man. Clara smiled. He was. Still alive? Last I heard, retired east. Taza nodded. Leo asked the question Clara had known was coming. Do you regret staying? The room grew quiet. Taza looked at him. No, leaned forward. Not even after 10 years? Taza's eyes moved to the walls. Ask a different question. Leo waited. Taza continued. Do I hate the walls? Yes. Do I miss the mountains? Yes. Do I wake angry? Sometimes. Many times he rested his hands on the table. Regret is not the same thing. Leo looked down. I got all those years. Yes. And you lost them. Taza's voice softened. No, they were never yours to give back to me. Leo's eyes filled. Clara looked away to give him privacy. Taza reached across the table. He placed 2 fingers against Leo's wrist, the same place he had once counted a dying child's pulse. Leo looked at him. Taza counted silently for several beats. Then he released him. Strong, he said. That single word undid Leo. He lowered his head and cried, not loudly. Taza sat with him in the silence. Clara's own throat tightened, but she did not interrupt. The guard at the door pretended not to notice. When time was nearly over, Clara reached into her bag. She placed a small wooden object on the table. Taza stared, the horse carving, one short leg, smoke-darkened wood, polished smooth by a child's hands over 10 years. You kept it, he said. Leo did. Leo wiped his face. I thought you should have it back. Taza pushed it gently toward him. No, but you carry it. Why? Taza looked at Clara, then at Leo. So you remember fast things can be used for more than running away. Leo closed his hand around the carving. The guard cleared his throat. Time. Clara stood. She did not know whether she would see Taza again. The uncertainty made every possible farewell feel wrong. Taza rose too. No chains connected his wrists now. Prison regulations had changed. The absence of iron made the room feel briefly strange. Clara extended her hand. Taza looked at it. Then he took it. His grip was still steady. Part of the way. Vance found a wagon. Taza raised an eyebrow. He changed a little. People do. Sometimes. She squeezed his hand. I told Leo your name. Taza looked at the young man beside her. I see. Clara's eyes filled. It still wasn't enough. No, she almost laughed, still honest. Yes, Leo stepped forward. For a second he seemed unsure whether he was allowed to embrace a prisoner. Taza solved it by opening his arms. Leo hugged him. The older man closed his eyes. Clara watched Taza's hand rest between Leo's shoulder blades, exactly where the child's fevered body had once rested against hers through 50 miles of desert. A circle closed without anyone naming it. Then the guard opened the door. Taza stepped back. Leo held the wooden horse in one hand and the canteen in the other. Can I come again? Taza looked at the guard. The man shrugged. If the paperwork says. Taza turned back to Leo, then learned paperwork. Leo laughed. They left the fort near sunset. Outside the walls, the air smelled of dust and dry grass. Clara stood beside the wagon and looked west. The mountains were blue in the distance. Leo joined her. For a while neither spoke. Then he asked, Do you ever wish you stayed in Oakhaven that day? Clara looked at him. He was 15, alive. Sunburned across the nose, too tall for the coat he had worn all spring. She thought of the cedar cross, the dry road, the seep in the wash, the snake under the creosote, her bloody feet, Kesha's black mane, Taza's hands, Vance's chains. No, not even because of what happened to Taza. That is not mine to rewrite by wishing you had died. Leo absorbed that. Clara continued. I wish he had been free. I wish Silas had been braver before we left. I wish the town had helped. I wish the army had seen him as a healer before they saw him as a fugitive. I wish many things. She touched the wooden horse in Leo's hand. But I do not wish away the life all those choices saved. Leo nodded. They climbed into the wagon. As they started south, the fort shrank behind them. The road crossed open land where evening shadows stretched long from the sage. Clara removed her boots after an hour and rested her feet on the wagon rail. The scars were faint now, pale lines across heel and arch. Leo noticed, Do they still hurt? When rain comes. It hardly rains. That is why I live here. He smiled, night settled. At camp, Leo boiled water for coffee and placed the canteen from the White Canyons beside the fire. The tin caught orange light. Clara watched him measure grounds into the pot. He had Taza's habit of focusing fully on whatever his hands were doing. She wondered whether he had learned that from memory, from stories, or simply from the knowledge that a life had once depended on careful hands. It did not matter. The next morning they turned toward Oakhaven. The town would be larger than the one Clara had left 10 years before. The clinic had a proper isolation room now. Silas had trained 2 assistants. Reverend Pike was older. Ezra's daughter, the baby who had slept in Clara's borrowed cradle, was nearly grown. New people lived there who knew the Black Cross story only as something that had happened before their time. Clara no longer cared whether the town remembered every detail correctly. Leo remembered what mattered. A mother had walked because staying meant surrender. A healer had stayed because leaving meant abandoning a child. A soldier had obeyed a law and still found small places inside it where he could choose decency. A frightened doctor had failed and then spent years doing better work. A horse had carried freedom north and brought life south. None of those truths erased the others. They traveled together like tracks crossing the same stretch of desert. Near midday, Leo pointed ahead. 3 dark birds circled over a distant wash. Water? He asked. Maybe carrion. How do you know? I don't. He grinned. Honest word? Clara smiled. Always. The wagon rolled on. Behind them, beyond miles of flint and pale stone, a canteen at the fort still carried the cold mineral taste of the White Canyons. Ahead, Oakhaven waited beneath the Arizona sun, and in Leo's pocket, the little wooden horse tapped softly against a metal button with every turn of the wheel, keeping a small, steady rhythm all the way home.